affect the spring. And Tom snorted, he's not a hydrologist, he's a hydrostitute.
And we were told up there that night by their council that we didn't have a chance in stopping them. But then we started having meetings and inviting people, and that we were just awed by the numbers of people that would come. Older people from the area, farmers, retired people. It went statewide then. And finally, the incumbent governor, who had opened them with welcome arms, made a comment to Perrier that, hey, look, the people don't want you. Why don't you move out? They went to Michigan from Wisconsin.
In 1892, a 1-mile chunk of the Great Lakes and its waters was deeded by the Illinois legislature to a private company. The next legislature moved into office and voided the deed, and in 1892, the United States Supreme Court said, these Great Lakes, they're impressed with the public trust, and under this public trust, they can't be alienated, disposed of, diverted, or transferred for a private purpose. That doctrine remains as lively and viable today as it did in the late 1800s. And that's exactly what became the basis of the lawsuit.
MCWC was still waiting to hear the opinion when the letters from Nestle were sent to members of MCWC, young people that had expressed their opinion in the press, and Nestle then, they were going to do a slap suit against them.
Where corporations actually step in and sue citizen activists. Usually they're suing them on something that's absolutely ridiculous, and often they'll lose, but the citizen still has to spend a lot of money on lawyers' fees, has a lot of worry. This acts as a deterrent to activism, and it is absolutely outrageous that corporations are being allowed to do this.
And I was upset about that, but then...
As far as trying to intimidate, they put heat on MCWC as an organization, and it really laid the heat in on my mom.
You know, I didn't care what Nestle did to me. I was fighting Nestle, but no one's going to mess with my family, and especially my children.
Well, and clearly no company wants to be in the position of having to do that sort of thing. It was simply a letter that simply asked them to refrain from making comments that were not true.
Gosh, there's probably been 3 or 4 public hearings. Nestle was in attendance. There was newspaper press, there was television press. Just about anything I had said was either just my own opinion or else fact-based. So it was very hard to know what are they referring to.
And then I said, I'll be damned if they're going to do that to me. So Nestle came to Ferris to give a presentation. My son Chris was there.
My name is Chris Swear.
I felt like my greatest defense was just being as public as I could.
Received a letter that I, Chris Swear, am accused of slanderous or defamatory remarks.
My son was shaking. I mean, he was so upset.
And I'm wondering if those are charges, accusations, insinuations. I'd like to hear directly from your legal staff, if I could, please.
It was a hard thing to watch as a mother.
Chris, Fred, if you want to answer briefly, but I'd like to get to people that have questions about the project specifically, instead of maybe personally, okay?
And the whole crowd was furious.
But I mean, I tell you what, if at the end, Chris, there's time when we want to talk about that, there's no more questions about the project or water policy or groundwater, we would like to hear, okay?
They never followed up and contacted me. It never materialized as far as a slap suit. It tells me it was a load of crap, just like I had suspected.
The judge said, well, there's a diminishment, that's what the law is, it's illegal, you're done. And that was the end of it, we thought.
It probably took at least a year to be able to have our day in court. And then, when you think in 3 days' time, the Court of Appeals heard Nestle's case. Nestle then was granted permission to continue to pump 200 gallons a minute.
But in doing so, the Court of Appeals changed the law. Bottled water exports or exports of water in any form are hereby prohibited.
which is very different from most uses of water. Even agricultural uses have return flows, and it's available for reuse again and again. But once you put water in a bottle and you move it out of state, it's gone.
You made that a product, we invested, it's a private good. You can't take it from us anymore. It's too late, you open the door. Michigan is telling the world, come in and buy water rights here, and by the way, under this case, if you can demonstrate an economic benefit of shipping it somewhere else, you can have it. Changing the way water has been perceived as a public resource in a way that we may not be able to retreat if we make a mistake. And that's the problem.
When you take water out of its natural water basin and then ship it or move it, we know something about the ecological fallout from that. We don't know the full picture.
What happened to the Aral Sea? The Aral Sea was a lake, in fact, that was so huge that they called it a sea. And the countries around of the old Soviet Union decided to grow cotton in the desert and started siphoning off this water. And it's almost completely gone now.
Company comes along and says, the impact of 210 million gallons a year in a tanker truck is no different than 210 million gallons a year in a bottle. And you already let the bottled water people do that, so you have to let us do that.
And so that's how I got started in looking at bag technology.
If we massively ship water out of an area, the ecosystem is disrupted. The natural habitat damaged, biodiversity reduced, and aquifers dried. The water-rich area we chose to export from will itself desertify. The thirsty populations in the water-poor deserts we ship water to will simply consume the water and send it back to the sea via its sewers, thus still remaining a desert. Where one desert region existed before, two deserts now exist.
Water is a supply and demand commodity. The people that demand it don't have the supply. The supply is often in other parts of the world. The question is how to get it from source to market.
This sets up a kind of contest, and that is between city people and rural people.
Companies are out there constantly looking at what land the farmers own.
Going from farm to farm, hello ma'am, hello sir. Now what are you doing farming all day? It must be a lot of work. I bet you get up real early, and why don't you just let us rent or buy your water?
And we have had Texas Water come in and volunteer to build a pipeline. What I'm afraid of happening is the water will not be sold here. Into that pipeline will go out of the basin into areas such as Santa Fe or Albuquerque.
So this is a new development that's taking place as more and more of us move into big cities and don't want to think about where water comes from. Increasingly, it's coming from the places that grow your food. This is really, really, really short-sighted.
You're using water from an ecosystem in Northern California, transporting it through long pipes and canals to Southern California to grow alfalfa. The alfalfa is then shipped to places like Japan, where it is fed to the high-end Kona beef, and then much of that beef is shipped back to the U.S. So we've set up this system of agriculture that just doesn't work anymore, and it's really based on the concept of virtual water, where we're growing crops for export in thirsty places and then moving them long distances, rather than having our food grown more locally and more sustainably. China is a very dry country, but agribusiness is moving there because there are fewer laws and labor is very cheap. Almost all apple juice sold in the United States comes from China now. We're losing our ability to even grow apples because it's cheaper to produce them elsewhere. That means that a country like China that doesn't have very much water is exporting its water to the United States through apples. Then we sign trade agreements like NAFTA so that our subsidized corn using water from desert-like areas in the U.S. can undersell the farmers in Mexico. A lot of that water actually stays in the corn, and is then transported to another ecosystem and is completely lost.
For instance, here in Kenya,